video. I'm really excited about this case because, well, for a couple reasons. One, it takes place very close to where I live, so that's one reason. And the second reason is because it's a non-violent true crime case. I know that a significant amount of true crime is violent, but this one is not. But it's incredibly fascinating despite that. And I know that some people like to switch it up with non-violent true crime cases, just because violence can be so heavy at times. So today we will be talking about Sherri Papini, who was a 34-year-old mother of 2 young children, as well as a stay-at-home mom. And she was reportedly went missing and disappeared on November 2nd of 2016 when she had gone out for a run in her hometown of Redding, California. This was the shocking abduction of a mother of 2 small children that rocked a family, a Northern California town, and the nation. After Sherri turned up on the side of a highway on Thanksgiving Day, which was about 3 weeks after her mysterious disappearance, investigators worked tirelessly to find the people responsible. This case would garner national attention, but as investigators began to dig deep into Sherri's story, some things started to seem a bit fishy. A 6-year-long saga would finally come to an end in 2022. A question that once was, who kidnapped Sherri, would change to, was Sherri the mastermind behind her own disappearance? So you guys, this one is a fascinating case, so we are gonna jump right into our housekeeping and get that out of the way quickly, and we will dive into this case together. So housekeeping, if you have not already subscribed to the channel, I would be so grateful if you considered doing so. Please check out the pinned comment on this video down below where I will list 3 cases that I'm interested in covering. Please take a look at that list and comment with the one that sounds the most interesting to you. And then hidden gems. I will give you a hidden gem in this video, and please be sure to comment it down below when you hear what the hidden gem is. Finally, I have a non-true crime related ASMR channel that is all about rambles, so if you're interested, please check it out. It is called Opal Soul. Okay, so housekeeping has come to an end. Let's talk about this case. So, as is to be expected, when Sherri goes missing, a massive search was launched for her, including community and family members. Her husband, Keith Papini, he would pitch in to find his wife, and really this community came together to find this missing mom from this small Northern California town. At the time of her disappearance, her husband Keith would plead with the public for any help that they could was said that she had left behind her cell phone, a pair of earbuds, and some strands of blonde hair. Keith was quoted saying, "It is excruciating. I don't like to think too much about it because I just assume that I'm going to get a phone call any second, or she is going to show up at my house." And this was a quote from an interview with Keith and ABC News in 2016. A reward was offered for information relating to the case, and a GoFundMe account was also set up by friends of Keith to help the family in their search efforts, which raised around $50,000. 3 weeks after her disappearance, Sherri would be tipped out of a car in Woodland, California, which is in Yolo County, about 150 miles to the south of Redding. Fun fact, I used to live in Woodland. When she was tipped out of this vehicle, she was showing signs of having been starved, beaten, and branded by assailants who, according to Sherri, never communicated what they wanted from her. Her long blonde hair had been chopped off, and that branding that was on her shoulder was said to be of a Bible verse. So before we go into more detail on the case, I do want to break down a timeline of events, kind of where we are in the story, which is from her disappearance until the time she was found. So on November 2nd of 2016, sometime between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., Sherri reportedly takes her cell phone and earbuds and goes out for a run in her Redding, California neighborhood. That same day, on November 2nd, around 5:51 p.m., Sherri's husband, Keith, comes home from work and finds that she is not home and has not picked up their 2 children, who are ages 4 and 2, from daycare. He uses the Find My iPhone app to locate Sherri's phone, which is found about a mile from their home. And at this scene, he says that he finds the phone and earbuds along with a few strands of blonde hair. 2 hours later, at 7:51 p.m., Keith contacts the local police to report his wife missing. A $50,000 reward is offered for information leading to her whereabouts, and tips begin pouring into the Shasta County Sheriff's Office. 5 days later, which is November 7th, Keith is given a lie detector test because, as is pretty common, the husband is regularly a suspect when things like this happens. But Keith passes the lie detector test. Police confirm his whereabouts on the day of Sherri's disappearance and would say that there was no physical evidence to suggest Keith's involvement. One of his co-workers was interviewed and said that Keith cooperated with police and was as clean as a whistle. 3 days later, on November 10th, Keith speaks out about Sherri's abduction to People magazine, pleading for her return. He was quoted saying, "Just bring her home, surveillance videos gathered from homes and businesses in the area. They would comb through mounds of cell phone and technology data trying to get some kind of information. But according to Shasta County Sheriff Tom Bosenk, there really were no real viable leads at this time. On November 24th, around 4:30 in the morning, which was Thanksgiving Day, Sherri was spotted by a motorist on the side of I-5 in Woodland, California, which again was about 150 miles from Redding. The female motorist by the name of Allison Sutton would call 911 to report seeing a blonde woman on the side of the freeway looking terrified. Allison was quoted saying, "I saw this woman with long blonde hair in the right shoulder of the freeway, and she was waving a piece of fabric that looked like a shirt, waving it up and down, trying to flag someone down. It was obvious she needed help." End quote. So let's go ahead and talk about what happened once Sherri reappeared. So immediately police would begin to work hard to find answers to what was completely presenting as a mystery. Sherri would share that her abductors were two armed Hispanic women, describing them as, quote, one older, one younger, one with straight hair, one with curly hair, and they spoke Spanish a lot, end quote. She would say that these two Latina women abducted her at gunpoint and took her in an SUV to a location where she was kept chained up. She would also share that these two women claimed that if she told the truth about what happened to her, then she would be trafficked to someone in law enforcement. So because of this threat, Sherri tells police that she's very distrusting of them and law enforcement out of fear and not knowing who she can trust. So because of this fear that she expresses, Sherri is able to be interviewed with her husband, Keith, present at all times to help her feel comfortable answering questions. During one of the interviews, Sherri was quoted saying, "I don't know you guys. I don't know if you're in my corner. I know my husband. I know my husband's in my corner." End quote. Recorded police interviews with Sherri in the hours after her return showed that she was reluctant to speak with investigators, claiming that her abductors told her she was going to be trafficked. So this wasn't necessarily a red flag for police because it's not uncommon when there are abductions to for these people to tell the victim really off-the-wall things because it's a fear tactic, right? It holds control over them. So they weren't really that alarmed knowing that her abductors told her that if she speaks the truth that she'll be trafficked by law enforcement. So this really wasn't a red flag at the time. And at this time, police had very little to work with aside from the vague description of these two female suspects. And it would take investigators a full year names of the suspects to the public. An entire year. So Alan Ernesto Phillips, who was the co-founder of the Northern Hispanic Latino Coalition, would tell ABC News that the hunt for suspects rattled the Redding Latino community. He had said, quote, "Latino women were fearful that they might look like one of those people in the sketch," end quote. And honestly, that makes me so sad that this community was so afraid that they would be caught up in something when they were innocent. On December 2nd, Keith would describe in an interview how Sherri's weeks in captivity really traumatized her and stuck with her both physically and psychologically. He would say, quote, "When lights are off, when doors are shut, when she hears certain sounds, I mean, it's something that I don't know how to deal with and will need somebody who can help her through that from a professional standpoint," end quote. Keith would also share in his interview that aired on Good Morning America on December 5th that Sherri managed to survive the abduction by thinking about her husband, her 4-year-old son Tyler, and her 2-year-old daughter Violet. As the time passed since Sherri's return home, the police would continue to work to find answers. Sheriff Bosenko from Shasta County would comment on how unusual abductions are, relatively speaking, and that having 2 female abductors is even more unique, which would lead them to several concerns. Now, as is pretty common when something like this happens, and especially when it kind of goes viral nationally, different theories and speculations would pour in about what really happened. It would focus not just on Sherri's family, but also on an anonymous donor who offered a 6-figure sum for Sherri's safe return, as well as on Cameron Gamble, a government security contractor living in the Redding area who would act as a middleman or liaison between the family, law enforcement, and journalists, news sources, etc. Some of the wilder theories floating around would suggest that this entire abduction was a hoax, perhaps to spread scary stories about the local Latino community, and it was speculated that this somehow was race-driven, or that there were racist tendencies involved. It was also speculated that this could be an inside job designed to promote the business interests of Cameron Gamble, who would appear in a couple of widely seen videos pleading for Sherri's return. Now, Redding, California is quite an uneventful place. It's a small town, not much to do there, and it's really known as a gateway to the natural splendors of Lassen Peak and Mount Shasta. The last notorious crime to take place in Redding was a similar disappearance in 1998 of Tara Smith, who would go missing at the age of 16 years old and would never resurface. She also had gone for a jog, although in her case, the prime suspect as a boyfriend with a rap sheet including sexual assaults and assault with a deadly weapon. So, after Sherri went missing, the Shasta County Sheriff's Department appears to have considered just a couple of common scenarios. Either that her husband had done her harm, and as we know, Keith was quickly cleared as a suspect, but we do know that he was looked at as a suspect in the very early stages of investigation. And another scenario was that maybe Sherri had walked out on her life, staging an attack so she could start a new life somewhere else, right? Like, we've heard that theory before, and that has been known to happen. The California Department of Justice would initially list Sherri as a voluntary missing adult before changing its classification in response to a public outcry to disappearance under suspicious circumstances. As time went on and the circumstances of her abduction remained a mystery, the lead investigator on the case, Anthony Bertain, would say that he did not think she had been abducted, despite ample testimony that Sherri was a loving wife and a, quote, supermom completely devoted to her young kids. Former Shasta County Sheriff's Deputy Captain Pat Cropholler told ABC News that investigators noticed several red flags in the story that Sherri Papini would tell about her abduction and abuse. For instance, she had different explanations as to why she was branded on her shoulder by her abductors. Okay, so clearly things are starting to take a turn and the microscope is pointing at Sherri. After her return, investigators collected Sherri's clothing so that it could be tested for any biological material. And you would expect, given her story, that at least some trace of female DNA, other than her own, of course, would show up on tests. But this was not the case. They were eventually able to determine that DNA belonging to a male was present on her clothing, but when that DNA was searched in the CODIS criminal database, no positive hits were returned. Investigators would also look to her phone records for more answers, and they were able to determine that in the days prior to this abduction, Sherri had been in touch with several men that were not her husband. Now, police would most certainly interview Sherri's friends, an ex in her life, trying to get some idea of who Sherri was. And a common theme that came up was that Sherri had a tendency to lie and run away from her problems. Aisha Coleman, one of her friends, would say, quote, "That is how she used to deal with things as a child. When things got hard, she would just run away." End quote. And police would also learn that there had been some infidelity issues in her past, according to interviews with some of her friends. But throughout this time of trying to piece together the story and find hard evidence to support the true narrative of what really happened to Sherri, not much came to light. It wasn't until 2020 that investigators were able to make more progress in the case, when, with the help of genetic genealogy, that DNA found on her was finally matched to James Reyes, who happened to be one of Sherri's ex-boyfriends. So as you can imagine, James becomes the front and center main suspect, and police immediately seek him out for questioning. When the police question him, James Reyes would initially state that he had not spoken to Sherri in years, but he would eventually reveal that they had been in contact and that she had asked him for help. Detectives told ABC News that Sherri lied to James Reyes, telling him she was being abused by her husband Keith. James would tell investigators that Sherri was trying to get away from her husband. However, it was unbeknownst to James that investigators had already thoroughly looked into Keith as a suspect and ruled him out, and believed that any claims against Keith were unfounded. When police asked James how his involvement fit in with the two Hispanic women Sherri claimed to be her abductors, he would tell police that he knew nothing about this involvement of two Hispanic women. So, major red flag, and this is fishy. Furthermore, James would reveal that Sherri suggested he rent a car and pick her up. Then they would travel 9 hours south to Costa Mesa, where she would stay at his apartment with him for weeks, which is the time frame that she was supposedly missing. James would also reveal to police that the bruises, cuts, burns, rashes, all of that on her body were largely self-inflicted, and that she had also asked him to specifically hurt her. James would recount to investigators how Sherri asked him to brand her, which really caught him off guard because that was not something he had done before to somebody. Now, everything would change around the time that Sherri was found along the side of the highway. James would tell police that everything changed, like with their dynamic, on Thanksgiving when Sherri told him that she missed her kids and wanted to go home. So, as you can imagine, things change drastically. Now that the investigators were armed with James Reyes' account of this kidnapping, or supposed kidnapping, they would call Sherri and Keith down to the station for questioning. In August of 2020, the police questioned Sherri again with Keith by her side, and they would tell her that they matched the DNA to James Reyes. And they would tell her that James came clean and tell them everything that he knew. So at first, when Sherri is presented with this by detectives, she completely deflects the questions about James's story. She would maintain that she did flirt with other men from time to time, but other than that, did not have any romantic or sexual involvement with anyone else. She would claim that this story was not true and completely stuck to her story that it was two women who abducted her. Now let's think about Keith for a moment. He has been by his wife's side from the moment she got back from this abduction. He advocated for her and searched for her when she was missing. And now he is sitting at a police station next to her, learning about her involvement with her ex and the story that the ex has brought to the table. Keith was utterly shocked at the revelations that he heard during this police questioning, and at one point gets up and walks out of the interrogation room, which I completely sad for Keith when I think about what he must have been feeling at that moment. And after all of this goes down, he would later be quoted saying, "I'm the idiot husband who stayed around the whole time." So obviously at this point, investigators don't believe the story that two women abducted Sherri, and they were now working the theory that this abduction was a hoax. They would piece things together and come to the conclusion that this in fact very likely was true, that there never were two Hispanic women, and that the most realistic and reasonable story and understanding and evidence that they had really does tie to James Reyes's revelation that he shares with everybody. So in March of 2022, Sherri would be arrested and charged with making false statements as well as mail fraud. And we'll get into that here in a bit. So prosecutors would say that this kidnapping hoax that she is involved with cost taxpayers more than $300,000 in wasted resources, including money that she collected from the California Victims Compensation Board and Social Security disability income. Now, when all of this comes to light, that something is not right with this story, and in fact, Sherri was not actually abducted, this news would send shockwaves through Redding, which is entirely understandable, especially for such a small town. Residents who had supported Sherri, who had looked for her, who helped fundraise, to have money, to help them find her, all of these things that these people did, they would say that they felt beyond betrayed, which is also so understandable. Now, if things weren't bad enough, two local residents who had supported Sherri and her family during this time were Terry and Marilyn Smith. And as you remember, I mentioned that Tara Smith was the 16-year-old girl that went missing in 1998. So her parents were supportive of the family during this time. And the Smiths would tell ABC News that when they learned the truth about what transpired, that it was an absolute slap in the face. And I personally think it's beyond disgusting that Sherri would lean on the Smith family, knowing that their daughter had actually been kidnapped and never returned. Marilyn Smith was quoted saying, "It just kind of makes a mockery out of anyone who's really lost a person," which I can't agree more with. So let's take a moment here for our hidden gem. Our hidden gem is that Sherri relied on the Smith family, the parents of Tara Smith, who had gone missing from Redding, California in 1998. So Alan Ernesto Phillips, who was part of the co-founder of that Latino coalition, would say that the Latino community felt vilified, which is also understandable. He was quoted saying, "There are no dangerous, masked, gun-toting Hispanic Latino women here wanting to abduct your children, especially if they're white," end quote, he said. Keith would release a statement to the news, when news spread about this entire situation being a hoax, shortly around the time of Sherri's sentencing, that read, "My current focus is on moving and doing everything I can to provide my two children with as normal, healthy, and happy of a life as possible." Now, at that she was willing to accept responsibility for her actions. So I suppose that is a good thing, given the circumstances. She was also quoted saying, "I am not choosing to stay frozen like I was in 2016. I am choosing to commit to healing the parts of myself that were so very broken." End quote. U.S. District Court Judge William Shub would order Sherri to pay $309,000 in restitution, and would actually even questioned if she would be able to do that. And he said, quote, "I would ask rhetorically, who is going to employ her in the future?" End quote, which is what he said during the sentence hearing, which is a valid point. When you commit a crime like this, I feel like it follows you for life. So yeah, like, probably gonna be hard for Sherri to get a job down the line. Now, interestingly, prosecutors would agree to recommend a sentence on the low end of the sentencing range, estimating to be between 8 and 24 months in custody, which was down from the maximum of 25 years for the two charges. So I don't know how we go from 25 years to 2 years as the max, but that's what prosecutors agreed on. She had to agree to pay restitution, maxing out at $300,000, and that includes the cost of the search for her that covered several western states, and the subsequent investigation into the quote 2 Hispanic women that she falsely claimed kidnapped her at gunpoint. Sherri would waive her right to an appeal and was scheduled to turn herself in on November 8th of 2022 to begin her 18-month sentence. Sherri has not really offered much in the way of rationale for why she manipulated her friends, family, and community into believing that she had been abducted. Her attorney, William Portanova, said that he doubts that even she knows fully why she did this, although there has been some mention of mental health and family issues kind of being the catalyst for this. He would suggest that a very complicated mental health situation, and said in her long-delayed acceptance of responsibility and punishment is part of the healing process. Sherri would say, leading up to her 18-month sentence, that she had been receiving psychiatric care for anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder ever since her return, which ended up being more than $30,000 worth of treatment, for which she billed a state victim compensation fund, and which is now part of her restitution. According to Dr. Ian Lamoureux, a forensic psychiatrist and frequent expert witness who teaches at the University of Arizona College of Medicine and the Mayo Clinic, he said, quote, "It is a mistake to assume mental illness is the cause of this unusual behavior." End quote. There could be a rational, if mysterious, explanation, according to Dr. Lamoureux, though he cautioned that he has not examined Sherri and many factors in the case remain unknown to the public, so you can't take his word on this at 100%, given that he's only looking at it from a certain angle with certain information at hand. The prosecutors would argue that her fake kidnapping was not impulsive, and that she had planned it for more than a year without her husband knowing. organization and planning would seem to make conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and depression an unlikely explanation, according to Dr. Lamoureux, again, who specializes in complicated criminal and civil cases. Sherri's former boyfriend, James Reyes, would also tell investigators that they didn't have sex while she stayed with him in Costa Mesa, which is obviously not a vital part of this story. I just found it really interesting that perhaps there really was nothing romantic going on between the two of them. Dr. Lamoureux would also state, quote, "She may have expected that the kidnapping hoax would bring her fame and fortune," end quote. And we do know that Sherri did benefit financially from this. Aside from the victim compensation, she would acquire $128,000 worth of disability payments, and her family would receive about $50,000 from that GoFundMe campaign, all of which she would have to pay back in her restitution. So yes, there was fame and fortune that came from this, a fortune that she had to pay back, and fame that I don't think anybody really wants. As a possible related factor, Dr. Lamoureux has researched the false hero or pathological hero phenomenon that takes advantage of society's treatment of victims as heroes. Those who fake their own victimization may be seeking recognition or popularity, and if mental illness is involved, it may suggest a narcissistic personality disorder. I decided to include all of this information that Dr. Lamoureux provides because I think it's fascinating. I can't say that it's 100% accurate in Sherri's case, but I do think that it's very, very interesting from the perspective of someone who specializes in complicated criminal cases and who can look at the mental aspect and psychological aspect of why criminals do what they do. So I just wanted to include that in this case. During her sentencing, Sherri would say, quote, "I am so sorry to the many people who have suffered because of me, the people who sacrificed for the broken woman I was, the people who gave willingly to help me in a time that I so desperately needed help. I am choosing to humbly accept all responsibility," end quote. According to federal inmate records, Sherri Papini is currently an inmate of Federal Correctional Institution, Victorville, which is a medium security federal prison in San Bernardino County. And if she went in to her sentence in November of 2022, she should be finishing up her sentence like middle of 2024, if I can do my math. Since all of this came to light, her husband Keith has since filed for a divorce and filed for full custody of their children. So that will conclude the case of the kidnapping hoax of Sherri Papini. This one was fascinating to me. Please don't forget to comment the hidden gem or just tell me your thoughts on this case in general. My absolute favorite part of putting these videos out is hearing your feedback on what you thought of the case. Thank you for joining me today, and